And we're live. What's up, everybody? Another week, another review. Honestly, these reviews are popular. People seem to like them, so might as well keep doing them. This week, we're doing the Jubilee episode. It was with Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib against 20 Palestinian protesters. For those who don't know, we've had Ahmed on this channel before a few months ago. If anyone's interested in watching it, you can just type in his name and my name on YouTube and you should find it. Those tuning in, let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'll keep the chat respectful as always, of course. We're going to do around, I guess, an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then we're going to do a little after party on Discord. For those who are not yet in our Discord, you can find a link to that in the description of this video. Awesome. Let's do this. Wait, hold on. There we go.
Moderate view, and this is the extremist view. We are not extremists.
My name is Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib. I'm a Palestinian American who grew up in Gaza, where I lost immediate and extended family members in the war. Since October 7th, I've been on a mission to delegitimize Hamas and promote a pragmatic pathway forward away from violence and toward peace and coexistence. And I am surrounded by 20 pro-Palestine protesters.
Well, that's a very sensible introduction. And let me, in the past months, many of our longtime viewers have critiqued me because they feel like I've been criticizing Israel all too much, which I think for very good reason. But if you're tired of me criticizing Israel and want to see me critique the other side, I think this is probably a good opportunity, because I imagine I will be, well, I guess let's see, but I imagine I'll have a fair bit of critique for both sides here. But there's no Israelis in the room, so we something new for a change. So let's do it.
My first claim is that October 7th was an abhorrent disaster that unleashed the worst catastrophe in the Palestinian people's history.
So real quick, I mean, it's a good prompt. I think there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, horrible catastrophe. Saying that it's the worst thing to happen to Palestinians, that I think is probably an area that's easier to push back on, because you have the Nakba, there's a long history of tragedies. But I would say what Israel's done the past year is probably up there as one of the single worst, if not the worst.
Hi, my name is Ahmed.
Oh, so what a dick. Not even going to shake his hand. Carlos? He's not even Palestinian. Okay.
Worst catastrophe. I think that you're using specific words for specific reasons. The Nakba, catastrophe, right? I want to offer my condolences. I believe that 33 members of your family were exterminated by the Zionist entity. So my question is, how is this worse than what initiated everything, which was the Nakba in 1948?
My grandparents were pushed out in 1948, where 700,000 Palestinians were unfortunately forced to leave their homes, and in some cases had no choice but to leave their homes. Since October 7th, over 2.1 million Palestinian people have had to leave their homes due to the catastrophe that Hamas's actions.
Oh, guys, I am going to speed this up a little bit. It is nice to listen to that normal speed, but just so we could get through this a little quicker. Maybe we'll do 0.25, okay?
Unleashed by attacking Israeli communities on October 7th. Quantitatively and qualitatively, Hamas's actions have triggered one of the worst catastrophes in the Palestinian people's history, whereby 50,000 Palestinians would still be alive had Hamas simply kept its soldiers at home on October 7th.
More than 50,000, but yeah.
Right. So,
including family members of my own.
So by that logic, if Zionists wouldn't have colonized Palestine, then none of this would have began to begin with, right?
As a Palestinian who grew up in the Gaza Strip, what I can tell you is that
Who put you there?
the Gaza Strip.
Who put you there?
had immense potential to be the pride and joy of the Palestinian people, to prove that we are absolutely capable of having a functional state of our own that can rebuild our society, rebuild our heritage, reclaim our presence on the land.
The entirety of the land, or just, because I believe your parents were in a refugee camp, right? They were forced into that.
There are nuances and complexities in
Well, who
history.
put them there?
Nuances and complexities.
But that's a very objective thing.
In
Who put them
history
there?
that unfortunately
Zionists, right?
unfortunately.
So this is interesting. It seems like Ahmed, meanwhile, is a little bit concerned with. He seems a little bit resistant to criticize Israel. I feel like this is going to be tough for him to defend. Like, go after Hamas all you want, but you don't need to defend it. What Israel's done, I don't know, but we'll see. We're going to speed it up a little more.
Fortunately, are not willing to listen to some of the nuances and the complexities. Right. Do you know, for example,
well,
that
just
in
answer
1948,
that,
in 1948, the Arab armies that were coming in to supposedly save the Palestinian people asked Palestinians to leave. Asked Palestinians to leave. Disarmed Palestinians.
Okay, I mean, this is just one of those Hasbara claims that this has been widely debunked. There's not a single serious historian that claims that overwhelmingly Palestinians left during the Nakba because Arab armies left. Benny Morse's book, he gave, I believe it was, Benny Morse wrote this in his book, but it was based on an IDF report after the Nakba explaining the causes of people leaving, and being told to leave was like the single last one. It was a negligible amount of Palestinians leaving was because of that. I mean, it's not even, shouldn't even be part of one's argument about the Nakba. And it's widely debunked, Hasbara claim.
And said, oh, this is a matter of 2 to 3 days.
So we agree that they should have been armed.
That's not my point. My point is,
you said they disarmed them as if it's a negative thing, right?
The history of the Nakba itself is so singularly focused on what happened from the point of view of Zionism and
colonizers, right?
Whereas I actually want to understand what happened with the Arab failures that have
the failures to stop Zionism.
But I think so. Credit for Ahmed, because I think this is very important, right? It's very easy to just blame Israel for everything all the time. Life's simpler when you have a boogeyman to blame, and Israel's a great boogeyman to blame because Israel has no shortage of culpability here. But it's essential to also focus on what the other side could have done differently, what they could do differently moving forward. You don't solve your problems just by pointing fingers at others. The best way to solve problems is also to change yourself and your own people. So I think it's very healthy. And this is one of the things I like most about Ahmed, is that he is self-reflective and he is self-critical, both, I won't say of himself, it's not an interpersonal conversation, but of his people. I think that's fine. The question is what's the balance, right? When you take it too far, then you're no longer seen as an objective actor, right? You have like people like Yosef Haddad and Mossab, who are like, they hate Palestinians, but they are Palestinian, right? So that's like taking it to one extreme. Ahmed seems to be somewhere in the middle where he has capacity to criticize both. But I do hear that often a critique of him is that he seems to want to criticize. He's much more charitable to Israel than he is to Palestine or Palestinians. But let's continue seeing.
Right?
Why wasn't a Palestinian state? Right? Why wasn't a Palestinian state established between 1948 and 1967?
Because the British were in control of the region, and we know for a fact that the Palestinian revolt was in opposition to the British, right? So when people talk about, we've been opposing colonization for 75 years since the Nakba, add another 30 for British colonization of the region. Is that incorrect?
Between 1948 and 1967.
Is it incorrect that the British
who was in charge between 1948 and 1967? Is that incorrect?
You haven't answered a single one of my questions. I asked, who put your parents in Gaza? And you weren't willing to answer that. Can you at least answer me that? Who put your parents in Gaza?
Between 1948 and 67 and 1967.
You've dodged every one of my questions.
It's not dodging so much.
So just it's a very simple question. Who put your parents in a refugee camp?
On my mom's side, the Arab invading armies asked the invading armies to liberate the Palestinian people.
Why were they invading?
To supposedly stop the Zionist invasion.
From doing what?
From taking over the Palestinian people's lands in the areas that later on became Israel.
Okay, and you're okay with that?
I'm not okay with that.
Okay, so we should liberate that land.
80 years later, Israel is a recognized state that exists, that is recognized by the entirety of the international community. And this illusion that armed resistance is going to get rid of 7 million Jewish Israelis, 7 million.
We're talking getting rid of the Zionist occupation, the Zionist entity itself, right? the colonial forces.
So do you believe that there should be a space for the Jewish people?
There always have been. What we're opposition to is, or opposing, I should say, is the Zionist entity itself. Why do Europeans have the right to colonize and impose a government on Palestinians? Why?
Well, I would say that we should ask that to the
No, I'm
King of
asking you.
Jordan
I'm
at the
asking
time.
you. He's not here, unfortunately.
At the time, we should ask the Arab armies that came to liberate the Palestinian people
Why
and
didn't they
ended
defeat
up
the Zionists?
and ended up facilitating part of the Nakba by asking folks. My mom.
So you're blaming the Nakba on the Arab countries.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I appreciate Ahmed's pragmatism in recognizing that Israel currently exists, and this whole approach for some zero-sum solution is most likely just going to end in more bloodshed and is counterproductive. But it is interesting. He seems to really not want to criticize Israel, and I wonder why that is. And real quick, I want to read a comment by Constantine, who says, according to Morris, this was the case for 6 to 20 villages out of 500 that were depopulated. Yeah, okay. That's in terms of those leaving because Arab leaders told them to leave. So really small amount. But I don't know, Ahmed's message of like being practical, being sensible, middle ground, all that would be much more compelling if he was also just outright criticizing Israel, because he would be seen as more of an objective actor. He's not really seen as an objective actor right now. He almost comes off currently in the few minutes we watch as just like almost just like a media figure for Israel. But let's give it time. Let's see.
I'm blaming the failures of the Arabs and of the Palestinian leadership at the time in acting in the best interest of the Palestinian people, and then looking at 1948 to 1967. Why wasn't a Palestinian state established? Why wasn't it until 1964 that at the Arab League summit that the decision was made to create the Palestinian Liberation Organization and to push for Palestinian statehood? Why was Jordan allowed to annex the West Bank and Egypt annex the Gaza Strip?
To be very clear, I'm against that, but that's a regional conflict, right? That's a regional. What I'm opposed to is Europeans thinking they could colonize Palestine.
Do you
That's
know
the
that half
primary
of Jewish
contradiction, right?
Israelis? Do you know
I'm
that
not talking
half of
about.
Jewish
No, I'm talking
Israelis
about the
are-
originators.
Okay, this guy has an interesting approach. This is very much something born out of like the Western university culture, I feel. Oh, I don't care, Jordan, that's regional. Here it's like these white European colonizers. I mean, that's not what the conflict is anymore. This isn't a conflict between a group of colonizers. Right now, it's Israelis. Most Israelis were born in Israel, and not to mention that while Zionism is a settler colonialist movement, the way Zionism succeeded was through settler colonialism, but it's also an indigenous people who engaged in that settler colonialist movement. So it's now a lot of people don't like the argument focusing on Jewish indigeneity. And if you don't like the term indigenous, you could say Jewish connection to the land. People resist that argument, and for good reason, because that argument is generally made as justification for the human rights abuses against Palestinians, right? So often that's the defense. It's like, wait, this is our land, so we could take it back. That's not a good defense for Zionism. But when we do want to understand have a more holistic understanding of the conflict and even finding solutions, I think it actually does help understanding that this is a population that's returning. And I imagine, many of the far left would be sympathetic to an indigenous rights movement if they identify them as indigenous. It's hard to see like a Ashkenazi Jew as indigenous, but let's say right now let's just give a hypothetical. Let's say there was a large population of Native Americans that were taken as slaves to Europe hundreds of years ago, and they decided to start a movement to reclaim some of their land in South Dakota. Now, I don't think people would say they could start displacing people, but I think there would be a lot of sympathy for that movement from Western leftists. That same sympathy is not given to Zionism. So it's something these people should worth reflecting on.
of the Zionist project? Can we agree that they were Europeans?
Not entirely, no.
The majority?
Not entirely.
They were majority secular Jews.
There were certainly some elements of the
majority was.
Zionist movement that certainly emerged out of Europe. But I'm saying right now, I am thinking about the future. I'm thinking about Gaza. What happened in Gaza on October 7th was not because of Zionism.
What happened in Gaza on October 7th?
What happened with the attack that Hamas launched as a terrorist organization. You have taken an entirely different approach to thinking about October 7th. You have eaten up the Hamas propaganda that says October 7th happened because of Zionism.
And you're eating up the Zionist propaganda, right? I don't ever hear you bringing up, and I've seen many of your interviews, I don't see you ever bringing up the IOF, if you want to call them the IDF, the Hasengat, where they came from, right? They started as a terrorist militia, did they not? Were they not killed in British soldiers? How is that irrelevant? That's where they came from, and they continue to impose that upon the Palestinian population. I ask you, why is it that in the West Bank, there's nobody stopping all the colonization?
Are you Palestinian? Are you Palestinian?
I'm Mexican.
Have you lived in the Gaza Strip?
No, when you were run out, right? When you aligned yourself with, what was that organization you're involved with? Because I know you work for the Atlantic Council right now, right?
Do you know anything about my history?
Yes, I do.
So tell me,
your
what is my
parents
history?
were forced into Gaza, were they not? They grew up in a refugee camp, were they not?
Do you know anything about Hamas and how it treats Palestinians in the Gaza Strip? Do you know
Not
anything?
worse than Israelis and Zionists treat them.
Do you know that in the past 2 days,
we agree.
Hamas executed dozens of Palestinians who were hungry, who were desperate, as Hamas was looting.
Dozens of Palestinians, meanwhile, the Zionist entity exterminated 33 of your family members?
Pause. You've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your seat.
It's kind of funny seeing a Mexican like call out a literal Gazan about Israel Palestine. And you know, we don't need to appeal to authority here. So he does have a right to challenge him on the merit of his ideas. But there's something funny about somebody who has no connection to land taking like a far more pro-Palestine stance than somebody who comes from Gaza and has lost over 30 family members in Israel's assault on Gaza.
Hi, Daniel. My name is Ahmed.
Daniel, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Ah, nice. She shook his hand. And it's nice that he stands and shakes their hand. Most people don't do that.
So I want to shift the conversation a little bit.
Please.
You said that October 7th was one of the most
Look at that Palestine necklace. Interestingly, it's also an Israel necklace, depending on who you ask, minus the Golan Heights.
detrimental things to Palestinians, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I would beg to differ because I think the fact that, also, let's not pretend like October 7th was an isolated incident. It didn't come out of nowhere. It came after years and years and years of occupation, oppression, and siege, okay? So on October 7th, when the resistance took place, because it wasn't an isolated incident, it also happened to take place during a time where social media was rampant. So for the first time in a really long time, Palestine was in every conversation. Most everybody that you know could talk about Palestine in one way or another. They knew about what was going on. And for the first time, we are hearing people recognize how detrimental the IDF has been and the occupation has been in history. And I think that the fact that it took place during a time where social media was at its height, we're seeing people on the ground, we're seeing people take videos of the rubble of their homes, we're seeing people have to makeshift water filters so that they can have drinkable water. We are seeing children get shot for collecting rainwater. We are seeing children dying and starving and emaciated infants. And for the first time, it's not just on the news, it's on your phone. We're watching a genocide take place on our phones, and most everybody is talking about it. So how can you say that October 7th was so detrimental to the Palestinians when it is the first time that it has been brought to heightened media attention?
Well, I share your horror in what's happening in Gaza. I mean, it is an unimaginable level of death and destruction and pain and suffering and hunger. And in some cases, I mean, people like being burnt in their tents and all the really horrible level atrocities that I have called out. And I have said that the Israeli government and military have committed war crimes. I've actually overtly said that.
I mean, it doesn't take much to recognize that.
But my point is, I don't want my people and my family and my community and my beautiful Gaza that has meant so much to the Palestinian people there and to what remains of my family to merely become a social media phenomenon where it is on display for people to look at and say, wow, look at this is so horrible.
That's the only way. That's the only way that they can get people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting claim. Who's going to do anything about it if not the international community? I mean, that's literally one of the main pressures on Israel to take higher precaution to stop the bloodshed is the international community. And if people weren't protesting, then governments would feel less pressure. The only reason governments are being harder on Israel, like Western governments are being harder on Israel, is not because whoever the president or prime minister is has a conscience and saying, okay, yeah, we need to do something about it. No, it's coming from internal pressure. I mean, maybe you could say it's coming from politicians who also have a conscience, but to think that that the pressure from the people isn't having an impact and that we shouldn't not only continue, but double down on it. I mean, who else is going to stop the bloodshed?
people to recognize just how bad it really is, because there is no mainstream media covering what has been going on for 80 years. It's all skewed media.
So may I just clarify? Because if so, that sounds really awful what I just heard you say. You're saying that you want to see images of dead Palestinians. You want to
No
see...
one wants to see those images. But if that's what it takes to get people to recognize what's actually going on instead of another Middle Eastern war, then that's what it takes. It's tragic that that's what it took.
Do you not recognize that Hamas, in official communiques, has and publicly and overtly has made it clear that part of their strategy relies on causing maximum death and destruction?
That's not true. That's not true. That's another Hezbollah talking point. You hear this all the time. Hamas there's never been any official statement that their strategy is to maximize the harm to their own civilians for PR purposes. You have some, call it an obscure quote saying, if we need to continue to sacrifice our own for the liberation of Palestine, we will. That's very different from saying our goal is to have as many of our own die. I mean, it's like Netanyahu a few years ago, probably close to a decade ago, said, we will continue to live by the sword. So imagine if somebody interpreted that. It's like, oh, well, Netanyahu explicitly said that his goal is to wage endless war against Palestinians. That's not the right interpretation of that quote, and that's what he's doing. And again, I don't think Ahmed here is intentionally misinforming. It's just a very popular belief. But there's no basis there's no official communication that this is their strategy. And if someone has one, drop it in chat. But you're not going to find anything on that. You'll find a quote saying we'll sacrifice our own if we need to, which is similar to what she's saying.
In Gaza, so that the ensuing
in response to Netanyahu blatantly saying that his goal is ethnic cleansing.
May I just finish this point, please? That Hamas wants to generate
blatantly saying that his goal is ethnic.
Yeah, but Omar, I'm midstream, so it's not a good time.
No. The stream was suspended. They're saying like on YouTube, the stream was suspended due to policy violations. The stream is not working on YouTube anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The
people were.
Damn. Okay. Okay. Well, then I'm Omar. Then I'm very happy that you came on and bothered me. So yeah, interesting. That's never happened. Let's see. Adar stream got taken down by Mossad. Shake my head. Yeah. What's it saying? Because I'm seeing it on my end. Huh.
It says suspended for policy violations.
Well, that's never happened. That's never happened before.
It's the 8200.
Stream unavailable. Suspended for policy violations. Interesting. Yeah. So I guess it depends on the channel because. Wait. Hold on. So wait, remove. Oh, so no one can even see me on stream right now. Damn. Well, that's okay. Wait, are we still on Twitter though? Are we still live on X? What do we do? Do we pivot to something else? Yeah, I'm still live on X. Okay, well, you know what? Fuck YouTube, I guess. Yeah, okay. Okay, well, X viewers, good to see you.
Although you can share the X link, the YouTube chat, and maybe people some pivot to that.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna invite everybody to Discord even better, you know.
That's okay.
So I guess there's some pages that don't let you stream, like Pierce Morgan, I guess. Doesn't give a shit, but I guess Jubilee is not keen on that. So you can't do a live stream review. I guess it's like stealing content. They view it like that. X is still live. Yeah, okay. By the way, shout out to not a sponsor, enabling water bottles. It comes. Wait. Oh, YouTube's back. Okay. So YouTube did come back because the stream's not going. So now we need to decide what we are going to do. Do we just cut YouTube and keep it going on Twitter and Discord, or do we just change this entirely to something else? No, I don't, Constantine. I'm pretty sure that the second I pull it back up, they're going to suspend it again. I think they're letting it go because I pulled it down. What do you think? What does the community want? Quran Discord, what do you guys think? Just continue here. Yes, keep it going. People want to keep it going. We would never see the video. He said anything we run a lot, but it's not a Jubilee. Loads of folks live. That yeah. Okay. So why do y'all think that happened? So it's not a Jubilee issue. All right, guys. Well, we got a good Quran. Okay, we're just gonna keep doing it. I'm gonna pull it back up if YouTube doesn't want to show it. So guys, I'm dropping a Discord link. You could also watch it on my Twitter. I'll give you that as well. But you should join Discord. That's where the community's at. That's what it's all about. Okay. That's hilarious. Omar, thanks again for hopping on, and good thing you have admin rights, because if not, I'd still be doing this. Cool. I don't think YouTube will take it down. It happens. A lot of people report a video, just my guess. Okay, let's try. Cool. Thanks, community. Thank you. Bring it up. And for all those on YouTube that had to deal with that little blackout, I appreciate your patience.
Ethnic cleansing.
May I just finish this point?
Wait, where'd my audio go?
Point, please. That
To
May I-
Netanyahu
Okay.
blatantly saying that his goal is ethnic cleansing.
may I just finish this point, please?
Oh wait,
Response to
announced that it had executed 6 pounds and 13 others, and like yeah. I mean, Hamas.
Netanyahu blatantly.
Hamas has executed a lot, a fair bit of Palestinians for protesting, some for stealing aid, etc. I mean, it's not like where Ahmed's completely right is Hamas is not. They're not good guys, right? It's not like they're these virtuous freedom fighters against the evil IDF. It's you could look at it as bad fighting bad, and then you could look at the people very much deserving rights and protection on both sides, right? I think that's a good framework. Hate the institutions, criticize them, demonize them, work to transform or dismantle the institutions. The people work to protect their rights.
Saying that his goal is ethnic cleansing.
May I just finish this point, please? That Hamas wants to generate maximum death and destruction on the ground in Gaza in hopes that the ensuing imagery can actually rile up the international community, rile up folks in the Western diaspora on college campuses, so that then this could delegitimize Israel, so that this could stop the war. I'm talking about facts on the ground as somebody who has so much attachment to the reality of Gaza on a daily basis. My brother is there right now running one of the biggest medical NGOs. He has 70 direct reports that are doing work that's saving lives. I hear from folks from the protesters.
There wouldn't
Hamas.
be lives to save if there was no occupation.
How about
your brother would not have to run an NGO if the occupation never existed and they weren't constantly bombing and killing children.
My brother was there.
Sorry, you've been voted out by the majority. Please return to your
Thank
seat.
you very much, Dana.
You know, I don't like their whole that they need to run to the thing. It just makes it unnecessarily competitive. And if you're faster, you're more likely to get to speak. I guess it adds entertainment value, but it's not the best for the discourse, in my opinion.
Evan, nice to meet you. Good to meet you as well.
So I think one of the issues with your framing in that October 7th is leading to what we're saying, the genocide today in Gaza, is the explanation that what is happening is inevitable. Genocides are not inevitable. This is the first armed conflict since the Rwandan genocide, in which the majority of deaths overall are women and children. The October of Gaza had some of the worst bombing campaign that we've seen since the Korean War or
No. Wow, this is wild that Jubilee is putting this as a fact check. This is completely wrong. The UN Human Rights Office estimates 70% of those killed in Gaza were women and children. This is widely debunked. This is information that comes from the Gaza Media Office. There's no basis for this. Those who know, I've covered the death toll extensively here, and it's definitely horrific. But the percentage of women and children, based on the data we have, is around 51%, not 70%. No basis for that. So it's interesting that they actually added this as an official fact check. They need to fact check themselves.
World War II. This type of level of destruction is not inevitable. This shows the explicit.
And real quick, just so you know, like 50% women and children is extremely high. In Syria, it was like 20 to 30%. 50% is very high. So I don't want you all to think, oh, okay, that's not that bad. No, compared to other instances of violence, it's very high, but it's not 70%.
aims of the Israeli war cabinet, which they have explicitly endorsed as being a part of, for example, Trump's proposed plan of ethnically cleansing the Gaza Strip. The goal, for example, right now, with the complete blockage of food and aid, is to make Gaza uninhabitable. We cannot say that this is an inevitable consequence of armed resistance, which armed resistance is an inevitable consequence of occupation. What makes Hamas's argument for armed resistance?
Yeah, I don't buy that. But that's not true. So genocide is not an inevitable consequence to armed resistance, but armed resistance is not the inevitable consequence to occupation. I would say that they're both likely results of those. So more likely than not, when you oppress a people, they will be violent towards you. But that doesn't mean October 7th and how it manifested was inevitable. Hamas made a choice on that day that they didn't have to make. But it was, you could call it likely that something would happen. Okay, but it's very likely that Israel would have responded with extreme aggression. Both these things are true. I think the framework that we should look at it as is Palestinians have a right to resist. That doesn't mean that any form of resistance should be considered acceptable. Israel has a right to self-defense. That doesn't mean that any form of self-defense is acceptable. So October 7th was not an acceptable form of resistance, and Israel's response to October 7th is not an acceptable form of self-defense.
Is the fact that in the West Bank, where the PA operates as basically an administrative state for the Israeli government and actually goes insofar as to protect settlers, what that actually does is it functions as to make the case for Hamas to have instances of armed resistance. For the last you brought up why we haven't had like a Palestinian state. For the last 2 decades, Israel hasn't even been interested in that. And that's even to say that they were, for example, interested in within the Oslo period.
I'm hearing that the stream died again. Is that true? Is that true, chat? Damn. Did stream die again? Well, we just need to keep it running, but Omar, what's up?
I'm saying I'm on YouTube and it's still working. It wasn't suspended.
Okay. Maybe we got a false report. So while we're at it, thank you, Miss Mortician 1986 for the $10 super chat. Miss Mortician said, recognizing the good and the bad on both sides is how I humanize people. To summarize, as conflicting as good versus evil is a disservice to all of the sacrifices and legitimate gripes of both sides. Amen, Miss Mortician, and thank you again for the super chat.
Which I don't think was actually the case.
So the fact on the ground remains that 50,000 Palestinians would still be alive had Hamas made a different choice, but had they simply kept their fighters at home on October 7th. I recognize the imbalance of power dynamics between Palestinians and Israelis, but with clearly the Israelis, if I may finish this point, sure. Within said imbalance, there exists plenty of room for Palestinian agency and accountability and responsibility, such that October 7th was a choice. It was not an inevitability.
But you think the 50,000 Palestinians that are dying, you're saying that that's an inevitability though, and I'm saying that no genocide is inevitable. But that's exactly the framing of the point that you just brought up, is you said that October 7th is what's causing what's happening right now in Gaza. What's causing what's happening right now in Gaza is the Israeli state. Hamas
served our people, the defenseless Palestinian people, on a silver platter to the most far-right government in Israel's history. What did you expect would happen?
Actually, Israel served that. They did.
So, I mean, yeah, I think they both have a point here. We do need to say, we do need to make it clear that Hamas does have choices. They didn't need to do that. But history did not start on October 7th. You can't say had they stayed home, 50,000 people would still be alive. Because then you could also say, had Israel not dropped those bombs, 50,000 people would still be alive. Had Zionism never been a thing, 50,000 people still would have been alive. Right? There's no end to the cycle of blame. So it's really all about like having all parties that are involved in whatever atrocity being able to take mutual responsibility for whatever they're responsible for, whatever atrocity they're responsible for, or war crime they're responsible for. So I think it's fine to criticize October 7th, obviously, right? But to just frame it as then they'd be alive. Okay, well, there's many things that happened before and after October 7th that could have had those 50,000 people still alive, right? You can't, when you focus on a singular point and make that the cause for what's happening, it's likely because you're trying to paint a certain picture.
everything they could to undermine Fatah and support groups like Hamas. So
well, I'm glad you brought that
yeah.
point up, because what happens in Gaza doesn't stay in Gaza. The fact that Hamas was propped up by the Netanyahu government and by the Netanyahu regime should tell you everything you need to understand to delegitimize this group, to understand that they were used to undermine the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, which I don't subscribe to the Palestinian Authorities,
Sure.
the entirety of their approaches. But the Palestinian Authority was the closest thing we had to a political framework that in the 90s, when I lived in Gaza and I experienced that.
All right, guys, the stream did die again. All good. I'm just going to drop the Discord link and we're going to keep the show going. Fuck YouTube. I wonder why. Stream died. Join Discord to keep watching.
The tail end of the Oslo peace process, a time of immense hope and optimism. We went from having to me peace and coexistence with Israel and pragmatism meant that we shed the Egyptian travel document and we got a Palestinian passport. It meant that we had an airport in the Gaza Strip. We flew in, my family and I, in 1999 and in 2000 on the Palestinian Airlines.
Sure.
That was undermined by failures on the Palestinian leadership side and by Hamas's rise to undermine the Palestinian nonviolent approach.
I'll be the first to say, I think Palestinians have every right to criticize their own leadership. I think that you can always good.
Sorry, you've been voted out. Please return.
Thank you
You got to let the guy finish his sentence.
very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hi, Josh. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think you use language very loosely. We said genocide and we said colonization and you said taking over. You say so many things to diminish the words and the language. You use your personal experience, which is horrible. In your terms, is abhorrent. You should never have to deal with that. But to place the onus on Hamas is so despicable, because the reason that Hamas is there, you just said, was propped up by Israel. Why were they propped up? Because they wanted to take out the PLO. Why did they want to take out the PLO? Because they were actually going to create some dissonance with Israel. Another thing you have failed to mention is U.S. intervention on leading Israel, the veto power of the P5. When you said Palestine has not been legitimized, why is that? How many times has it been brought up to the supposed council, right? And been voted out by who? Who opposes it? 98% of the time it's the United States with the P5 veto power, because they want to have a party like the Saudis and the Israelis in order to take control of the Swana region. And another thing you said, you wanted to utilize and place blame and shift blame to the Arab people during all these catastrophes. Yes, it's after the Millet system and after the government that were getting propped from World War II, people were just scrambling, trying to figure out how to live. And when you had European colonization shifting lines to create boundaries in order to say, this is now Palestine, this is now this is now that, of course, people are going to be groveling, trying to figure out how to do it. And you used Jordan. What did Israel do to Jordan and to Palestine in 3 days, mind you? 3 days, they bombed the crap out of them and took their land, took the Golan Heights, took this and that. This is not a one-time occurrence, and this is happening. And it's going to continue happening. And armed resistance is necessary, because Fanon said that decolonized can only liberate themselves through armed resistance. And you want to delegitimize Hamas, but
I mean, that's just not a correct statement. There have been nonviolent liberation movements, nonviolent civil rights movements. I can hear the case that, not hear the case. Israel has stifled nonviolent Palestinian resistance as well, pretty consistently.